You did not enter an Eastern meditative community. You are in a Baptist Protestant church, but what you just saw is a reenactment of a ritual I perform when I stand on a beach and look at the ocean. Chances are, when you take a vacation, your feet are going to hit the beach somewhere. At least that is with most Americans. The number one vacation spot for Americans involves sand. Yes, I don't know who said that, but maybe they're ready for heaven. If you have trouble sleeping, for example, did you know that you can download 8 hours of the sounds of nature to help you in your nighttime slumber? The most downloaded one is waves from the ocean. Real estate in Naples, Florida, and in Malibu, California, and in 100 other coastal villages and towns are at a premium. Why? Because they are on or near the water. Now, even though I was born and raised a Midwestern boy, I have nautical blood in my veins. I love the beach. If you're going to the beach, take me with you, drop me off. I will be fine for a week living on the beach. Goodbye allergies. Hello Coppertone. Goodbye smog. Hello ocean breeze. When most people think of paradise, sand probably enters their mind. Unless you're the lovely and gracious Anita, who would, like John Denver, love to have a Rocky Mountain High. You know, that's what... Oh, there's a few of you pagans in the room. Now, if you grew up in Egypt in the 13th century BC with Moses, Aaron, and the boys, you were spoiled. Endless coastline front property from the jewel of Egypt known as the Nile River. Every morning, most Egyptians would trek down to the Nile. Some to get water from the Nile. Others, like Pharaoh's daughter, to bathe in it. And still others, if you were a good devout Egyptian, to pray over the god of the Nile to bless you. Surrounded by arid deserts, Nile was the paradise of Egypt. Now, imagine for a moment taking the fam for an afternoon getaway to the Nile River. You got your picnic, you got all the niceties, you got your sunscreen, and you take a dip in the Nile. It is cool and refreshing amongst these arid temperatures. You get out, it's okay because there's palm trees that will shade you. Maybe you want to drink your margarita or, well, wink, wink for those of you that don't, other things. And it is a wonderful day of paradise. And as you're taking that splash, you hear downriver screams out in the echoing down the ravine. Get out of the water. It's red. And all of a sudden, some fish began to float by you, belly up, deader than a mackerel. You start to get out of the water, and as you splash, some water hits you, and instead of tasting salt like you would be accustomed to from the Mediterranean tributary, you taste blood. And you get out of the water, and your swimsuit is stained with blood. And everything smells of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, it's a horrible smell. And then all of a sudden, the decaying fish floating dead float by. And instead of, it's more of, And it's all over Egypt. What is that wretched smell? It's the smell of God showing who's boss. That is our theme, as I articulated last week, that will go all the way into chapter 15, God as the boss. And we see it now with these famous 10 plagues, as famous as Santa Claus at Christmas, as famous as George Washington crossing the Delaware. If you grew up in church, you heard about the 10 plagues. Only one problem. The Bible never calls them plagues. The Bible actually calls them, at least Yahweh does more than once, signs and wonders of Egypt that I will commit. Remember, he says that all the way back to Moses in chapter 3 when he gives Moses the marching orders. In chapter 3, verse 20, God tells Moses, I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I am about to perform. He uses, by the way, the same line at the beginning of chapter 7. Last week we saw this in verse 3. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and although I will multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. If you are a good Hebrew, and you're a good grandson of Hebrews and grandson's grandson of Hebrews, from the Deuteronomy time all the way into post-exilic literature, when Hebrews would be reminded of this time of Egypt, they would always be known as the wonders of God, never the plagues. Not that saying plagues is the wrong thing. After all, this came from the 16th century, a Latin term by the name of plaga, which is translated wound or blow. And with these words of strike, if you'll notice, there's a lot of striking going on in our story, then plagues do fit. So if you're here today and you refer to them as the 10 plagues, you're okay. It's okay to refer to it. The graphic image is now God is going to strike a blow at Egypt. And when he's done, everyone will be wowed, which is short for wonder. And everyone will know that God is the boss. So, what I'd like to do briefly this morning, and only this morning, because if you have ever studied the plagues, and if you study them, and we study them now, you'll find that amazingly, they're almost all identical in terms of structure, in terms of what is going on. The only difference, in fact, of the 10 plague structures is the actual plague itself varies. But I've given you in your notes, if you quickly follow along, a really 30,000 feet per view, because I'm really challenging myself. Do I want to do a plague a Sunday, or do I want to do 3 per Sunday, or, what do I want to do here? Because they all fit, and here's what I mean. Every plague starts the same and ends the same, without exception. They all start with, the Lord said to Moses, and he gives them the command. And they all end with a reference to Pharaoh's heart. So they begin, each plague, with God giving a command, and they end with a reference in Pharaoh's heart. There's also a very interesting pattern of the way that God confronts Pharaoh. If you're like me and you're not a morning person, I have had a bunch of you silly little people try to convince me that morning people are it. You'll get more accomplished if you get in the morning. I've done it. It doesn't work. Okay, I've got up at 5 a.m. Okay, I'm going to get up at 5. I go to bed at 4 a.m. I'm going to get to bed at 5 a.m. and I'm going to, take on the world. And by 5:30, I'm needing coffee because I have a headache. So you can take your morning and have it. And every morning person will come and say, well, what about Jesus? He rose in the morning. The women came to the tomb in the morning. Well, what about Pharaoh? He's a morning person and you don't want to be him. Because what we have in this great groups of threes, plague number 1 begins with Moses going to Pharaoh in the morning. By the end of this, Pharaoh won't want to be a morning person because he's got to deal with Moses. So plague number 1, the confrontation is, go to Pharaoh outside in the morning. Plague number 2, go to Pharaoh inside the court. Plague number 3, don't go to Pharaoh, just give the plague. Okay, so far so good. Then we get to plague number 4. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. Plague number 5, go to Pharaoh to his court. Plague number 6, don't go, just give a plague. And then we get to plague number 7. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. Plague number 8, go to Pharaoh to his court. Plague number 9, don't give a warning, just give a plague. And then plague number 10 is a special class to itself. That's where God gets personal. You messed with my firstborn, Israel. You didn't let Israel see their father for all these years of captivity. Guess what? Now I'm going to take your firstborn. So I'll get mine back. So plague number 10 is always in a special class to itself. Then we actually have a pattern of pain in the plagues. The plagues take on, if you're into sort of gore and suspense, it takes on a digression. Like Breaking Bad, if you've ever watched Breaking Bad. Walter White starts off chemistry teacher, great. By the end of it, my gosh, depravity. That's sort of like the plagues here. The first 3 plagues, plague 1, 2, and 3, are plagues simply designed to give discomfort to Egypt, to sort of wake Pharaoh up. Plagues 4, 5, and 6 are meant to destroy, to take something away that they'll not get back. Plagues 7, 8, and 9 are all designed to produce dread and fear and panic to get Pharaoh to change. And finally, plague number 10 is death, to kill. Now, I'm going to give you a helpful mnemonic device to remember the 10 plagues. This is why you pay me the big bucks, to think of things like this late at night. Now, admittedly, I borrowed it and then made it my own, so it's not mine originally. So here you go. Just remember this. Forever grateful for lasagna because hash looks definitely disgusting. If you're a music person and you do Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, for your little notes, I at least get this one. So you'll remember this for a few seconds. Forever grateful for lasagna because hash looks definitely disgusting, okay? Forever, let's take the first 3. Forever grateful for lasagna. See, I've already forgot it. So forever grateful for lasagna. So that's 9. What am I doing? See, be forever grateful for lasagna because hash looks definitely disgusting. Be blood, forever, frogs, grateful gnats. So there you go. You'll keep it for a few seconds, I'm sure. Why do we have 10 plagues? Why not 80? Why not 5? I can't quite answer that completely. The Bible doesn't. But I can impart of why the plagues that we have. If you were an Egyptian in the 13th century, you worshipped at least, that I know of, 80, that's 80 major deities. 80 major gods are worshipped in Egypt during the time of Moses. All 80 are clustered around 3 types of deities. You have the gods and goddesses of the Nile River, gods and goddesses of the land, and gods and goddesses of the sky. All of the 10 plagues deal with each of those deities. The first 2 deal with the River Nile. The next section deal with the land gods, and the next with the sky, and finally, as I said, the firstborn. That is in every one of these stories, so that is how you can read the plagues. Now, into the sermon at hand. There are 3 truths that I could hit replay every Sunday for the next 10 weeks if we took that road. They would be the same truths. They are the same lessons meant to teach both Egypt and Israel. Don't mess with me. I'm the boss of the universe. And you have them in front of you. Truth number one, something that we need to remember. God as the boss never negotiates with evil, but he always makes demands on them. I wish God's people would remember this. You would be happier if you remembered never to negotiate with evil. God doesn't. God, as boss, never negotiates with evil. He makes demands. The first 3 verses of our story, he issues a command. If you'll look at it line by line, it's nothing but demands on Moses. Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to release the people. Now, here we go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. Position yourself to meet him. Take out your staff. Tell him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to say to you. Then tell him this. Give him a command. Release my people, that they may serve me in the wilderness. God relentlessly is consistent in making the demands of the release of his people. God's demands are not negotiable. And there are scholars that I have read that would have us believe that that's what he's doing in the plagues, is sort of like giving Pharaoh an offer, and then Pharaoh makes a counteroffer, and then God sort of meets in the middle to get what he wants. I've actually read that this week, that some scholars believe that's why we have 10 plagues. God tries something once to get Pharaoh to listen. He doesn't, so God tries another tactic to get Pharaoh to listen. But that actually seems opposite not only what God is doing, but what Pharaoh does do. Someone once said that a great negotiator is not one who gets everything they want. That's not a good negotiator. A job of a good negotiator is to get 2 parties a little bit of something that they both want in exchange for giving up some things. Now that sounds like a politician came up with that. God would be a terrible negotiator if that's the case. God doesn't negotiate with evil. He doesn't say to Pharaoh, please, pretty please let my people go, but if you don't, I can give you this, and if we're willing to talk, then maybe give me... God doesn't negotiate. He's more of like General Grant of the Union Army, who really brought about a lot of new innovative tactics to war. One of his many innovative tactics was he would go away from what was sort of European-style warfare, particularly the parley, where if a commanding officer knew he was going to lose a battle, he would parley with the victorious commander, and he would say, look, if I surrender to you, leave my dignity. If I surrender, make sure all the commanding officers keep their gentleman titles and lands, making sure my men get to keep their arms when they go home, this sort of thing. And General Grant got his moniker U.S. Grant because of unconditional surrender Grant. He would pummel his opponent into surrender. No negotiations. And there are a few exceptions that he did, but he would literally beat down his opponent. And no, war is ugly. War is won by the aggressive use of force. People die, there's carnage, and I'm going to do this ugly, brutal, beat you down so you'll never do this again. That was his method. And God is a lot like that. He doesn't negotiate. He's like George W. Bush. He doesn't negotiate with terrorists. God doesn't negotiate with evil. It is possible then that Pharaoh goes down to the banks at the morning to pray, to bathe, but if he's a good Egyptian, he does it to worship his God. In fact, every morning, every good Egyptian would sing a hymn. You can actually Google this hymn and find it, called the Hymn of the Nile. It is written in the 14th century BC. For generations they sing this. Here is the first line of the hymn. Hail to you, O Nile, that issues from the earth and comes to keep Egypt alive. There are at least 3 gods associated with the Nile. I thought about showing you their picture, but I thought, well, I'm not sure you would digest it very well because they're quite graphic. The great god of the Nile is a god by the name of Osiris. In fact, there are pictures and inscriptions on walls. I shared a few last week for you. Osiris has a picture with the Nile River going through his veins because he is considered the lifeblood of the Nile flows through the god of Osiris. Then there's a second god that is worshipped, the god Nu, N-U. He is the god of the life of the Nile, the god of plants and fish, which is a major staple diet of Egyptians. And he is worshipped. But the biggest god, the god that if Pharaoh was going down to the banks in the morning to worship, he's probably worshiping this god, is the Egyptian god Hapi. Now, the reason I didn't show you a picture is Hapi's an interesting character. He is the fertility god of Egypt. He is portrayed as an old bearded man with female breasts and pregnant. You thought ours was the generation having to deal with this. The idea of Hapi as the fertile god is he was the god of the flood of the Nile, which every year the rains came in the spring. It flooded the Nile's banks, which then went inland and watered all the farmland, creating rich, fertile soil, which translates into money. The Nile was a money-making machine for Egypt, among other things. And Hapi, it was believed, was responsible. So no Egyptian wanted to tick Hapi off because they wanted the rains. They wanted the fertile soils. They wanted the rich crops that they would sow. And so they actually sang a hymn to Hapi. Here's how the hymn went. Hail to your countenance, O Hapi. Now, I thought of that for a moment. What kind of an Egyptian would I have to be to sing about the countenance of an old bearded man with female breasts and pregnant? But anyway, that's what they sang to Hapi. Hail to your countenance, Hapi, who goes up from the land, who comes to deliver Egypt, who brings food, who's abundant in provisions, who creates every sort of good thing, who fills upper and lower Egypt. And then this is the line. Everything that has come into being is through your power. Egyptians sang that, believed it, worshipped. And this possibly is why Pharaoh is down at the morning at the banks of the Nile to praise his God, the old bearded, female-breasted, pregnant man who gives overflowing Nile, and all power comes from Hapi. And God sends this old man with a staff and his brother to say, I don't negotiate with evil. Release my people. Second truth that emerges in the story. God's actions, and this is true for us today in 2023, God's actions are always intended to show the world who's the boss. Moses executes the commission, beginning in verse 17. This is what the Lord said. By this you will know that I am the Lord. By the way, a repeated line in every plague. Why does God do this? To show I am the Lord. I'm the boss. I'm going to strike. Oh, there's our word, plegah. I'm going to strike the water of the Nile with the staff that is in my hand. It will be turned to blood. Fish in the Nile will die. The Nile will stink. Egyptians will be unable to drink the water from the Nile. I am the Lord. My actions are always intended to flex my muscle and let the world know I'm the boss. My, oh my, we had this little thing called COVID a few years ago. And if anything, it reminded us how quickly the world can change. It reminded us of how quickly people can change. And it reminded us how vulnerable we are to things. The result of Pharaoh's failure to meet God's expectations is that Egypt's life changed just like that. When God strikes the Nile River, the jewel of Egypt, with blood. If you read the text, you'll see that this river of blood creates a chain reaction. The blood kills off the fish. The fish, we're told, begin to decompose. The river doesn't just stay with the Nile, but affects all of the Nile's tributaries. We're told here later that all the creeks and branches and streams, that every water source in Egypt is being affected, so much so by the end of the story, Egyptians are digging in the mud to find water. Later on, when Israel would celebrate this event in the Psalms, the psalmist would let us eavesdrop into what's going on in Psalm chapter 78, verse 44. There the psalmist writes, "Our God turned the rivers into blood so that no one could even drink from their streams." All of Egypt is affected. Now, the Nile River is the lifeblood of Egypt. It is the basis for their entire civilization. Egyptians used the Nile for almost everything, from transporting goods easily up and down the border, to drinking water, to an irrigation system to water all of their cropland, to bathing, to even supplying their number one staple of diet, which were fish, and on we go. Now, a few years ago, the week of Christmas, my neighbor, I live just half a mile from here, my neighbor, I think I was getting ready to come to Christmas Eve service. I think it happened on Christmas Eve. The city of Lenexa was putting in some new light posts. And as they were digging a hole to set these light posts, they accidentally hit a gas line. And the gas line backed up into my neighbor's house. The gas did. So the natural gas, literally, I didn't know this could happen, but it went underneath the foundation of my neighbor's house and stayed there. So much so that they literally roped off his house and evacuated his family. And for 90 days, he was gone from his house. The city paid for his hotel, and they paid for he and his wife for 3 meals a day he got, care of the city. Can you imagine being gone for 90 days in a hotel? I mean, some of us said, that's parrot, give me that. But 90 days. Now, that didn't affect me. Merlin and his wife, that affected them. They're 3 doors down. I was safe. That's one thing. Or when it snows and your neighbor's house is without power, but by golly, you've got Netflix. You can. It's different. All of Egypt is affected. And we're told, beginning in the next story, this lasts a week. Stench, unhygienic, no water. My grandma grew up lived in a town called Clarksburg. Little town of 300 people. And Clarksburg had a water problem one time. I'd go to my grandma's, turn on the water, and literally, I know some pastors can embellish stories, but I kid you not, it was dark brown. And it reeked. Like, Grandma, it won't kill. I'm not drinking this stuff. I've been drinking it for a while. Brushing your teeth, babe. How can you do this? This is not right. This is not safe. And sure enough, in this small town, they had a compromise in their water supply. You think? Who wants to drink dirty water? Egypt is a bloodbath. Let there be blood, and there was blood. And all of this, God tells us, because I'm going to show you who's boss. I created the world, and on a dime, I can use my creation for my glory. When 9/11 occurred, we found out later, at least what we were told, The people with nefarious intentions of our country deliberately targeted certain places that were symbolic of our national DNA. They just didn't target civilians. They used civilians as collateral. They targeted specific places that have national interest. They targeted the Twin Towers, which was seen back then as America's financial power in the universe. They targeted the Pentagon, America's military might in the universe. They targeted the White House, America's leadership power in the world. They targeted the Capitol, America's diplomacy. Thank God they didn't hit all of their targets, as bad as it was. God is deliberately targeting Egyptians' national interest when he says, your little God that you worship every day, that you depend on, let's see how you can compete with me. Guess what? I'm going to send two 80-year-old men armed with sticks to hit it. And it's going to create a national tragedy. Let's see if your little God Hoppy, the old bearded man with female breasts and pregnant, let's see if he can compete with the God of the universe. Sadly, they try. Which brings me to my third and final truth. Hard-hearted men will not acknowledge that God is boss. Now we switch to verse 22 and the end of Pharaoh and his court. My, oh my. When all this happened, the whole water supply done, people submerged in blood, stinking fish you can't eat, Pharaoh doubles down. Verse 22, the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. Now we don't know if this is sleight of hand. We don't know if this is evil magic, but what we do know is that Pharaoh's heart, we're told, remained hard. And he refused to listen to Moses, just as the Lord predicted. Verse 23 would be hilarious if it wasn't so sad. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not pay any attention to any of this. All the Egyptians dug around the Nile for water to drink because they could not drink the water of the Nile. So the magicians do the same thing. Now, we don't know what they did, if they scooped water and put it into receptacles, poof, here, or what they did. What we do know, and what is a good lesson for evil, is it is an imitator, never a duplicator. Now, think of the irony of what they've done. Think of the irony of what the evil one does in your life. The evil one, with all of his sly tactics and sleight of hand, actually makes your life worse than better. Look what happens. Now, if they really wanted to rival the God of the universe, what should they have done? They should have turned the bloody waters back into the refreshing Nile River and said, bring it on, God. Who's this God? Anything he can do, we can do better. But as they do it, as the evil one always done, they actually make life worse, because we're told they actually turn water into blood even more. They don't solve the problem. We know that because the final verse is people are digging in dirt to try to find water. So for all of their huffing and their puffing, they actually make matters worse, which I hate to be a pest. That's what all of our false gods do to us. Promising one thing and only making our life worse. What a picture verse 24 gives to us. A picture of desperate times and dashed hopes. Here the Egyptians are left to scrounge for life. Why? Because their little gods are powerless. That's what always happens to our idols too. Our false gods always let us down. They always fail you. You know that you've made something into an idol in your life and in my life. I know when it feels as if the whole world has been destroyed when it lets you down. You know you've got an idol there. It can be the house that you wanted that didn't happen. It can be the car that you wanted to drive, the sports team you wanted to win, the relationship you wanted to develop, the kids that you wanted their dreams to come true, or any good number of things. The Nile is a good thing for Egypt, but it turns out to be a god. And in the end, that god let them down. And it was a powerful reminder by the one true God. And what does he say? Why does he do this? So that you know that I am the Lord. There is no other. Now, brothers and sisters, as we close, what are the lessons for us today? I'd like to give you two and intertwine it to tell you what an amazing God we serve. And what it is, as we sang a moment ago, a joy to honor him. Our God still promises the defeat of every false idol. John in Revelation uses this exact analogy of water turned into blood, which for God's people would now always be the picture of destruction. And John uses it in Revelation chapter 6 as a springboard to say, this is what our God will finally do to all false gods in this world. Let me read it for you. This comes from Revelation chapter 16, verse 3. And the angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and the sea became like blood of a corpse, and every living thing died in that bloody sea. And the third angel poured into his bowl the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. And I heard that this happened because of what was said. You, O Holy One, who is and who was, for you brought these judgments, for they have shed the blood of the saints and the prophets, and you have given them blood to drink. It is what they deserve. And I heard all of the heavenly altar saying, yes, the Lord, the God Almighty, true and just are your judgments. What John is telling us is there's coming a time, and there is, where God's people now and in the future, like in Egypt, will be persecuted simply because they're his covenant people. Well, guess what? God will not let that last forever. And he's going to come down and he's going to flex his muscle again and say, I am God, you don't mess with me. And because of what you've done to my people, I'm going to cast judgment. So in Revelation chapter 16, blood and water, like in Egypt, is used for the judgment of God on those who cause his people to suffer. Now let me give you one more picture of this power of water being transformed. The same John who wrote Revelation wrote a gospel. And he talks about Jesus going to a wedding feast, a party. And the one thing you don't want to have happen at a party, and no one will ever, is you run out of food and drink. And they ran out of wine. They ran out of the best wine, because the best wine's always served first at Jewish customs. And they call upon Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He flips it, doesn't he? It is no longer judgment. It is mercy and mirth and kindness and joy and festivity, where he now changes water into wine. I like to think it's red wine. Not blood, red wine. And so we have not two different gods. We have one God with two different attributes. One of judgment to those who deny him, and one of myrrh and merriment and festivity and kindness for those who receive it. That's the God of Calvary. A God who protects his own and judges the world in righteousness and in judgment. And a God of Calvary who is a merciful, kind God. A God that we celebrate. And finally, why is he that God? Because of what evil tried to do to him but couldn't. If you think of the ultimate lesson here of the Nile River, taking something that symbolized life to Egypt and is made into death, you find this replayed at a hill called Calvary, where there the evil one takes death to try to once and forever destroy the Lord of the universe. And isn't just like, in great irony, our God, who uses the worst death in human history out of that to give us life. Resurrection life coming from that death. And it is for all those who receive it and take Jesus today. Father God, I thank you for this assembly. I pray the lessons that you teach here about you being the boss, you doing it always to demonstrate you're the boss, and how people deny it. Father, in this room, many of us know friends and family, neighbors, classmates, co-workers that deny your lordship. I pray that you would make us witnesses to this truth. Pray you bring many men and women, boys and girls, to the knowledge of your lordship. And God, use this story to teach us that you're always working for our benefit. You work for your people in judgment and in grace. And we praise you for it. In the sweet name of our Lord, we ask. Amen.